You've probably been told that Hades was the devil of ancient Greece and that Pandora unleashed evil from a box. But what if those are just lies we've been telling for centuries? For thousands of years, these stories have been twisted, translated, and tweaked for modern audiences. And somewhere along the way, the truth got a little fuzzy. Think about it. Movies, novels, and even classic art have painted a picture of Greek mythology that the ancient Greeks might not even recognize. The stories we think we know are often just echoes of the originals, warped by time and our modern love for simple heroes and clear-cut villains. But the original myths were rarely that simple. They were complex, messy, and reflected a world where gods weren't perfect beings, but powerful forces with some very human-like flaws. So, get ready to have your mind blown. We're about to expose 5 of the biggest lies about Greek mythology that have been passed down for generations. By the end of this, you'll see the gods, the titans, and some of the most famous stories in a completely new light. We're counting down 5 Greek mythology facts that are actually lies. Lie number 1. Hades was an evil villain. First up is a big one, maybe the biggest lie in all of mythology, the idea that Hades was an evil, Satan-like figure ruling over a fiery hell of eternal damnation. Pop culture, from Disney movies to summer blockbusters, loves to paint Hades as this scheming, power-hungry villain who's always trying to overthrow his brother Zeus. He's often shown with horns, surrounded by flames, basically the spitting image of the devil. But this version of Hades couldn't be more wrong. In the original Greek myths, Hades just wasn't a villain. He wasn't even the god of death. That job belonged to another god named Thanatos. Hades was the god of the underworld, the ruler of the dead. His job wasn't to cause death, but to preside over the souls who had already passed on. When the 3 big-shot brothers, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, drew lots to divide up the cosmos, Zeus got the sky, Poseidon got the sea, and Hades drew the underworld. He didn't choose it because he was evil, it was just the hand he was dealt. And despite what modern stories say, he wasn't known for trying to usurp his brother's throne. In fact, in one of the most famous plots to overthrow Zeus, led by Hera and Poseidon, Hades was noticeably absent. The ancient Greeks didn't see Hades as evil, but as a stern, neutral ruler. Sure, they feared him, but in the same way people feared death itself, not because he was cruel, but because his domain was an inevitable, somber part of life. His realm wasn't a one-size-fits-all hell either. The underworld was split into different regions: Elysium, a paradise for heroes, the Asphodel Meadows, a neutral zone for average souls, and Tartarus, a deep pit for the few who really ticked off the gods. Hades was more like a warden, making sure the boundary between the living and the dead stayed secure. He was a god of order, not evil. This whole misconception mostly comes from Christian theology, which blended the idea of an underworld with hell and a devil. Hollywood ran with this simpler good versus evil story, and the villainous Hades we know today was born. But the old texts tell a different story of a dutiful and surprisingly fair god just doing his job. Lie number 2. Pandora unleashed evil. From a box. You've definitely heard the phrase, opening Pandora's box. We use it to describe doing something that accidentally unleashes a ton of new problems. The story usually goes that Pandora, the first woman, was given a beautiful box, told not to open it, but her curiosity got the best of her. She peeked inside and released all the evils into the world: sickness, sorrow, death, leaving only hope trapped inside. It's a great story, but there's one tiny problem. Pandora never had a box. The original story comes from the ancient Greek poet Hesiod in his work Works and Days. In his version, the container wasn't a box at all, it was a pythos, a huge earthenware jar the Greeks used for storing things like wine, oil, and grain. So, where did the box come from? We can thank a 16th century scholar, Erasmus. While translating Hesiod's Greek text into Latin, he mistranslated pythos as pyxis, which means box. The image of a small, tempting box was way more dramatic than a big, clunky storage jar, so the mistake stuck. But that's not the only twist. What was actually in the jar is also up for debate. Hesiod says Pandora released all sorts of miseries on the world, and when she slammed the lid shut, only Elpis, the spirit of hope, was left inside. For centuries, people saw this as a good thing, that humanity still has hope in a world of suffering. But many scholars now think the original meaning of Elpis was closer to expectation, or even blind, deceptive hope. In this darker view, the hope left in the jar is actually a cruel trick that just prolongs our suffering by making us think things will get better. And to make things even more confusing, another version of the myth flips the whole story. In this telling, the jar originally held all the blessings from the gods. A foolish man, not Pandora, opens it, and all the good things fly away, leaving only hope behind to promise that the blessings might one day return. This just shows that even in ancient times, there wasn't one single correct version of the story. The tale we know today is a mashup of a major mistranslation and a very specific and possibly wrong interpretation of what was left at the bottom. Lie number 3. There were exactly 12 Olympian gods. Grab almost any mythology book, and you'll find a neat list of the 12 Olympian gods. They're usually presented as this fixed official council ruling from Mount Olympus. The lineup is typically Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, Demeter, Athena, Apollo, Artemis, Ares, Aphrodite, Hephaestus, Hermes, and then either Hestia or Dionysus. This idea of a solid group of 12 is really hammered into our heads. It feels official and easy to remember, but here's the thing. There was never one single, universally agreed upon list of 12 Olympians. The idea of the dodecathion, or the 12 gods, is ancient, starting in 6th century BC Athens with an altar dedicated to them. The number 12 was symbolic. However, who was actually in this exclusive club was surprisingly flexible and changed from place to place. While core members like Zeus, Hera, and Poseidon were pretty much always on the list, that last spot was a constant shuffle. The most common swap out was between Hestia, the quiet goddess of the hearth, and Dionysus, the god of wine and parties. Some stories say Hestia gave up her seat for Dionysus to keep the peace, while other sources just list one or the other. But the changes didn't stop there. Depending on the region or time period, other gods could sneak onto the list. Hades was sometimes counted, though he was usually left out since he lived in the underworld, not on Olympus. In some places, mighty heroes like Heracles were considered for a spot after he became a god. Other deities like Hebe, goddess of youth, Helios, the sun, Selene, the moon, and Persephone were all worshipped right alongside the main Olympians and sometimes included in local top 12 lists. The truth is, Greek mythology was never a single religion with a strict rule book like the Bible. It was a living, breathing collection of local beliefs and stories. The pantheon wasn't a static committee. It was a sprawling family tree with shifting loyalties. The idea of a rigid list of 12 is really just a modern habit of trying to organize a wonderfully chaotic system. Lie number 4. The Titans were evil villains. In modern pop culture, the Titans are the classic bad guys. From Percy Jackson to video games, they're shown as these monstrous, evil beings who were overthrown by the heroic Olympian gods. The great war between them, the Titanomachy, is painted as a clear battle of good versus evil. The Titans are the old, corrupt rulers who were rightfully tossed into the pit of Tartarus by the new, enlightened gods. This story is simple, dramatic, and not really how the ancient Greeks saw it. In the original myths, the Titans weren't automatically evil. They were just the older generation of gods, the kids of Uranus, Sky, and Gaia, Earth. Just like the Olympians who came after them, the Titans were complex characters with both good and bad traits. They weren't monsters, they were gods who ruled over basic forces of the universe. Hyperion was the Titan of light, Oceanus was the great river that circled the world, and Rhea was the goddess of motherhood. In fact, the time when the Titans ruled under Cronus was often called the Golden Age, a time of peace and prosperity. The war between the Titans and Olympians wasn't good versus evil. It was a succession story about power shifting from one generation to the next. These kinds of myths are super common. Cronus himself had overthrown his own father, Uranus, to take power. So when his own son, Zeus, eventually defeated him, it was just the cosmic circle of life, a divine civil war, not a holy one. It's also key to remember that not all Titans fought against Zeus. Prometheus, who famously sided with humans, and Oceanus, who stayed neutral, weren't punished with the others. Lie number 5. Zeus was an all-powerful supreme god. And for our final lie, let's talk about the big guy himself, Zeus. He's often seen as this all-powerful, all-knowing supreme being, kind of like the god in Abrahamic religions. He's got his thunderbolt, his throne on Olympus, and holds the fate of everyone in his hands. An ancient poet described him as a god who easily he makes strong and easily he oppresses the strong. This makes him sound pretty absolute. But while Zeus was definitely the most powerful Greek god, he was far from omnipotent. Ancient texts are full of examples showing Zeus's limits. The biggest check on his power was probably the Moirai, or the Fates. These 3 goddesses controlled the thread of life for every single mortal and god, and not even Zeus could go against their decisions. In Homer's Iliad, Zeus is devastated because his mortal son, Sarpedon, is fated to die in battle. He can cry and rage about it, but he's totally powerless to save him. This shows that even his immense power was second to the ultimate power of destiny. On top of that, Zeus wasn't all-knowing and could totally be tricked, often by his own wife, Hera. In a famous bit from the Iliad, Hera cooks up a scheme to distract Zeus so she can meddle in the Trojan War behind his back. She seduces him and, with a little help from Hypnos, the god of sleep, puts him into a deep slumber. An all-knowing god wouldn't be so easily fooled. There were even other gods Zeus was genuinely afraid of. When he tried to punish Hypnos for helping Hera, Hypnos ran to his mother Nyx, the primordial goddess of night, and Zeus immediately backed off, showing even the king of the gods knew not to mess with the ancient power of night. The idea of an all-powerful Zeus comes from later traditions that tried to make him into a more monotheistic-style god. But in the classic myths, he was a king, not a dictator. He had to make deals, form alliances, and sometimes bow to powers even greater than his own. From a neutral guardian of souls to a cartoon villain, from a giant clay jar to a little decorative box. The stories of Greek mythology have been changing for thousands of years. We've seen how Hades wasn't a devil. Pandora didn't have a box. There wasn't a fixed list of 12 Olympians. The Titans weren't simply evil, and even mighty Zeus had his limits. The myths were never meant to be a single, unchanging rulebook. They were living stories, told and retold, adapting to the people who shared them. The simple black and white versions we know today often lose the rich, complex, and messy nature that made these tales so great in the first place. The gods weren't perfect. They were reflections of us, full of flaws, passions, and power struggles. So, which of these misconceptions surprised you the most? Are there any other myths you think we've all gotten wrong? Let us know down in the comments. We love reading them. If you enjoyed getting to the truth behind these myths, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next video. Thanks for watching.